Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation, I am pleased to welcome you to our virtual program, Civil Rights and Responsibilities. What would Barbara Jordan do? A female leader of many firsts, Barbara Jordan was the first African American to serve in the Texas Senate since Reconstruction, the first African American woman elected to the U.S. Congress from the South, and the first to deliver the keynote address at a National Party convention in 1976. Today, we will explore Barbara Jordan's impact on individual rights and responsibilities by examining her own records from that key 1976 address. To help unpack issues of paramount importance surrounding civil rights in 1976 and today in 2021, I am pleased to welcome our returning students of the LBJ School of Public Affairs. You may recognize these bright students from our previous address on last month, Impeachment in Our America by Dr. Pernell Joseph. If you, in fact, have not seen that, I would encourage you to visit the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation YouTube channel to tune in for this thought-provoking discussion. Students, at this time, I would invite each of you to reintroduce yourself to the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation community, beginning with you, Claudia.
Thank you, Sam. So my name is Claudia Sandoval, and I am a Master of Public Affairs student at the UT LBJ School. My previous experience is in technology and management consulting, as well as government, which really led to an interest in how government innovation can spur equity in our communities. I'm currently a fellow with the National Development Council, working on projects that involve economic and community development, affordable housing, and small business recovery due to COVID-19. And I'm happy to serve as a student co-chair for the Barbara Jordan Forum, and happy to be back here because Barbara Jordan always has something to teach me. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to continue learning from her and from everybody here as we continue to look towards an America as good as its promise. I'll pass it on to my other student panelists.
Hi, I'm Azim Edwin. I am a dual degree student in law and global policy. I am interested in the intersection of international law and immigration. Before coming to professional school, I worked with refugees and asylees. I am in my second year, although my dual degree program is a 4-year program, and so the road is much longer for me than my classmates. I'm very excited to be back here honoring Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan was a trailblazer for human rights, a lawyer, and a policy expert. In short, everything that I aspire to be in my career. During this conversation, I look forward to hearing from the experts about their opinions. Now I will pass it on to Aaron Escajeda to introduce himself.
Thanks, Z. My name is Aaron Escajeda, and I am a dual degree student with social work and public affairs. I am interested in the intersection of social policy and immigration. For the past 2.5 years, I have worked with immigrant affairs departments across Texas, first in Dallas, San Antonio, and now Austin. I am in my 3rd and final year of my program. So if anyone out there knows of someone who is hiring, let me know. But I am especially glad to be back today because even though this is my 2nd year as a Barbara Jordan co-chair, I never stopped learning and being inspired by her legacy. I am excited to learn from Commissioner Cantú, a modern day Barbara Jordan who, like her, is also an educator, lawyer, and a policymaker. And now I will pass it over to Sam.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Azim, and thank you, Claudia. I would love to have the opportunity to present to you Austin Commissioner as well, Dr. Norma Cantú. Norma Cantú is a friend, she's a colleague, and she's a fellow Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation board member. Norma Cantú, earlier this year, we celebrated your appointment by President Joe Biden to be a commissioner of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Norma is the Ken McIntyre Professor for Excellence in School Leadership in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy in the College of Education at the University of Texas, where she also serves as a professor in the School of Law. Norma is a nationally renowned legal scholar, litigator, and civil rights icon. Norma, we are truly honored to have you with us for this discussion today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really do want to do a shout out to all the members of the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation. This is an organization that is committed to upholding the excellent reputation of Congresswoman Jordan. It included her personal attorney, who recently passed away, her physician, who also was her counsel, someone that she would speak to, and friends of hers. And through the commission, we were able to meet her family, her sister, who came and addressed us. Barbara Jordan was very prescient. Even though she passed away at a young age before the internet really hit its peak, she understood that your reputation needed to be jealously guarded. And she understood that those folk who knew her would be the appropriate guardians of her excellent reputation. So she put on her lawyer, her doctor, her neighbors, her closest friends, and then they chose me. So I'm the exception to the rule of the folk who serve on the commission. But I'm so honored that my colleagues chose me to join them because she has been a wonderful example. We all need role models. And it usually isn't one person that can be a role model for all parts of your life. But Barbara Jordan does step up and fill those shoes of being a role model for us in our public and private lives. I interviewed an African-American attorney from Texas who explained to me that he didn't have a role model, that he grew up in the borderlands near Laredo, where African-American students were not allowed to attend the high school. It was segregated, Latino, white only, but no African-Americans allowed. And I asked him, so now you're on the board of trustees of an almost all Latino school district. How did you come to that point that you could embrace and protect and look after the people who turned you away from your own education? Who was your role model that taught you how to do that? And he said to me, Norma, I didn't have a role model. I had to become the role model I never met. Barbara Jordan is a role model I have never met. And it's one that we're going to explore more today and talk more about. Since Sam mentioned and gave a shout out to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, I want to tell you just 2 sentences about them, and then we're going to go to the video. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights was formed back in 1947 by President Eisenhower. There were race issues that had come to the very front of the national scene, and coming from a background of the military and wanting discipline and order and people working together as a unit, it was very important to see a national committee that would be independent of the federal agencies, independent of the states, and would explore deeply the issues of race. The commission from the original design was to be bipartisan. Our commission today consists of 8 commissioners, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. We are working, and I've only been on it for a month, but we are working to show the rest of the nation what it means to work in a bipartisan manner. And this commission has the authority to collect data and to speak to Congress and speak to the American public about what agendas still remain to fulfill the American promise that Barbara Jordan talk so eloquently about. So without further ado, we will introduce an excerpt of Barbara Jordan's historic delivery of the keynote address at the 1976 Democratic National Convention.
In other times, I could stand here and give this kind of exposition on the beliefs of the Democratic Party, and that would be enough. But today, that is not enough. People want more. That is not sufficient reason for the majority of the people of this country to decide to vote Democratic. We have made mistakes. We realize that. We admit our mistakes. In our haste to do all things for all people, we did not foresee the full consequences of our actions. And when the people raised their voices, we didn't hear. But our deafness was only a temporary condition and not an irreversible condition. Even as I stand here and admit that we have made mistakes, I still believe that as the people of America sit in judgment on each party, they will recognize that our mistakes were mistakes of the heart. They'll recognize that. And now, we must look to the future. Let us heed the voice of the people and recognize their common sense. If we do not, we not only blaspheme our political heritage, we ignore the common ties that bind all Americans. Many fear the future, many are distrustful of their leaders and believe that their voices are never heard. Many seek only to satisfy their private wants, to satisfy their private interests. But this is the great danger America faces, that we will cease to be one nation and become instead a collection of interest groups. City against suburb, region against region, individual against individual, each seeking to satisfy private wants. If that happens, who then will speak for America? Who then will speak for the common good? This is the question which must be answered in 1976. Are we to be one people, bound together by common spirit, sharing in a common endeavor, or will we become a divided nation? For all of its uncertainty, we cannot flee the future. We must not become the new Puritans and reject our society. We must address and master the future together. It can be done if we restore the belief that we share a sense of national community, that we share a common national endeavor. It can be done. There is no executive order, there is no law that can require the American people to form a national community. This we must do as individuals. And if we do it as individuals, there is no president of the United States who can veto that decision. As a first step, we must restore our belief in ourselves. We are a generous people, so why can't we be generous with each other? We need to take to heart the words spoken by Thomas Jefferson. Let us restore the social intercourse. Let us restore to social intercourse that harmony and that affection without which liberty and even life are but dreary things. A nation is formed by the willingness of each of us to share in the responsibility for upholding the common good. A government is invigorated when each one of us is willing to participate in shaping the future of this nation. In this election year, we must define the common good and begin again to shape a common future. Let each person do his or her part. If one citizen is unwilling to participate, all of us are going to suffer. For the American idea, though it is shared by all of us, is realized in each one of us. And now, what are those of us who are elected public officials supposed to do? We call ourselves public servants. But I'll tell you this, we as public servants must set an example for the rest of the nation. It is hypocritical for the public official to admonish and exhort the people to uphold the common good if we are derelict in upholding the common good. More is required. More is required of public officials than slogans and handshakes and press releases. More is required. We must hold ourselves strictly accountable. We must provide the people with a vision of the future. If we promise as public officials, we must deliver. If we as public officials propose, we must produce. If we say to the American people, it is time for you to be sacrificial, sacrifice. If the public official says that, we must be the first to give. We must be. And again, if we make mistakes, we must be willing to admit them. We have to do that.
That's so powerful. To hear from the words of Barbara Jordan herself. Every time I hear her speak, I learn something new and something different stands out to me. In this excerpt, she talked about sharing a common national endeavor and shying away from interest groups. And in hearing that right now, it actually makes me want to switch the order of my questions and bring up another point. That in an earlier event for Barbara Jordan Month this year, we heard Eugene Scott talk about identity politics. And what part, if any, does identity politics play in this? And how, as a lay citizen, can we join in the fight for civil rights?
So Barbara Jordan was very open about describing her decision-making processes. And she would talk about having meetings, and in her biographies, and most recently I reread the one by Mary Beth Rogers. Barbara Jordan would describe that she would openly ask someone who was a very high-placed public representative, what is your priority? What would you most want to accomplish as a congressman or a US senator? And she would then ask the congressman, if I take care of that one thing that you most care about, will you support me in other issues? So she was open and transparent about getting folk to identify themselves. You know, are you for Texas? Are you for women? Are you for the economy? And disclose that to her, because she wanted that information honestly in front of her, so she knew if there were a way that she could work out a deal. And she was so successful in herself communicating her identity. She talked about how difficult it was to advance and move ahead and have more and more requested of her. But I've got to just summarize for you something that always just impresses me so much about her identity. She was in her 20s running for state representative. At 30, she became a Texas senator. I mean, so young. So her identity was youthful. She was the first woman to be governor of the state of Texas, and governor of the day, which was a high honor. Only a handful of people would even be eligible among the Texas senators. So she had an identity as a woman. And in Congress, she was already a member of Congress at 36. She gave that speech in her first year of serving. And at the end of that year, and this is in her biographies, she was diagnosed with an illness that would be progressive, it would advance. And so much happened to her so young. So she never publicly wanted to be identified as a person with a disability. But in her first year on the national US Congress stage, she had to confront that. And that was part of her identity. And then finally, she was asked to speak at the first African-American woman to speak at this convention that you just heard. She was put in front because she was being considered as a vice presidential candidate. She was one, again, of a handful of folk who were being carefully considered. So she was a national leader, and that was part of her identity. Now, not all of those identities are congruent. You know, doing your math, you take a figure and you check to see if the angles are congruent. Sorry, I snuck in a math lesson in there. Not all of those identities mesh perfectly together. And how you deal with the fact that you have alliances with feminists, because she was a feminist, with Texans, because she was a Texan, with the Black Congressional Caucus, because she was African American, all those pulled on her. And she was able to be honest and truthful in acknowledging all those different intersections. And sometimes people spoke about her as someone that they could not trust because they did not see her as solely one thing. She did not fit a stereotype. She was not 100% Texan or 100% with the women's groups. And yet she would let it go. In her biography, it talked about her just letting that conflict go and not dwelling on it, but to make the best decision at the time the decision needed to be made, and then to move on. And in her way, even though she died at a very young age, she died when she was not even 60 yet, she was 59. She took all her identities and molded them into someone that could be trusted, but not because of one slice of her identity. She was trusted as a person, as a whole, complete person. And I think that's beautiful about her.
Thank you so much for that. And now I will pass the time to our other student co-chairs to ask some additional questions.
Yes, you mentioned Barbara Jordan was a staunch advocate of feminism and women's rights. Where do you think the fight for those rights lie in today's world, in the current Civil Rights Commission, and where will those things focus?
The issues of this is the year of last year was the beginning of the year of celebrating women's suffrage, women's right to vote. And I had to look up the word suffrage, and I thought, you know, does it mean suffer? And it really doesn't. It comes from the root for to petition, to ask for, and to be heard. So a prayer is part of suffrage, and having the right to have your vote count is part of suffrage. So that movement for women to participate in all aspects of government is 100 years old now in the United States. The problem isn't that we don't give enough folk the right to vote. When she spoke about being feeling like she was not part of we the people, as the preamble declares, and I believe she meant it that at the time that was written in 1787, women couldn't vote, African Americans couldn't vote, people with disabilities couldn't vote, folk who were over the age of 18 but not yet 21 couldn't vote. People who didn't have property and money couldn't vote. There were so many folk that were turned away and that were not part of the we the people. And a lot of that has changed, but those changes are temporary if the people as individuals, as she said, individuals need to stand up for being part of this country and need to be recognized, and it requires enforcement of the laws. We have constitutional amendments and voting rights acts and civil rights acts, and we have commissions, and we have Congress supervision, we have civil rights section and Department of Justice. We have all of those national players, but it really falls to every individual to also speak up and say something when someone's voting rights are being diluted and they're being redistricted, so their voice is not as important as someone else's voice, or for someone to complain of segregated housing, or for someone to report problems of discrimination in employment. So I think the same issues she spoke about in 1976 of being concerned about not being treated with respect in the we the people, I think that carried the theme of it's her right to be respected, it's her right to be included in we the people, but it's all of our responsibility to protect everyone's individual constitutional protections. So there are rights that you can just talk about or write about, but there are responsibilities that people have to act upon and bring those up in a civil way so that there is a conversation, so that there is dialogue, and then action, like solid enforcement of the laws that have been around for 60 years now. The commission that I just joined, it's been around for 60 years, and the civil rights laws have been around more than that. So it's an action that's required of us. And the fact that she was ill when she gave that speech and yet looked so strong and so confident and so comfortable about defending her rights and defending everyone else's rights, the fact that she even acknowledged, my party makes a mistake, she says, we always make mistakes, but we own those mistakes and we work hard to fix them. That's an adult talking. We need to hear more adults talking like that and acting like that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantú. Kind of along those same lines, we hear Barbara Jordan talk about restoring our nation by realizing that we all share this national community and a national endeavor, but that responsibility falls on us as individuals to form that national community. So how can we begin to move towards that in today's political climate? And what steps do you think we as individuals can take to diffuse that tribalism that really engulfs our country right now?
Well, I think I'm going to wear my hat about being involved in policy. Oh, by the way, hey, ladies, the more hats you wear, the more shoes you can buy. Okay. So, get involved, get active, right? Wearing a policy hat, I got great advice from Maria Echaveste, who was working at the White House under President Clinton. She said there's 3 ways to get involved in policy. One is you raise a lot of money and you back a candidate and you get that candidate elected president. Okay, I don't have a lot of money. But the second way she said was 2, you are working every day to get the vote, to turn out that vote. And everyone knows that the election happened because you put the effort in and you were responsible and you have access to votes because they know you personally. You have those relationships. Okay, I did a little bit of that, but not enough. She said the third way is you are the go-to person on a social issue that really matters. Maybe it isn't on the front agenda of the White House right now or of Congress right now, but when they realize that they need somebody to speak to that issue and to offer suggestions on how to address that issue, you're going to be the person they're going to come to for that. So she was advising folk, spend your life working on things that you know enough about that you can be part of making them better and that you're prepared to act. When I got a call to work on the transition team, they gave me 3 days to make a decision because they needed to start right away. So all my life, I've been preparing, informing myself, keeping up with things, making relationships, trying to be part of a team that at UT, we have a huge team of folk who are trying to address social issues. Here was an opportunity for UT to send 2 people to the presidential transition team. That's what I would want to see happen more of. And that's a good way to live out her legacy, because she was always ready to say yes, even when it was inconvenient for her, even though she would have preferred to stay in Austin, Texas, or Houston, Texas, and not be in DC for so many years. That would have been very comfortable. But she always chose what was going to lead towards building a larger community. And she always reached out beyond her immediate groups. So if you're already working on prong 1 and prong 2, get your money, get your votes, congratulations. If you're a student right now, you're probably working on prong 3, and keep at it, because that's going to get you into the White House as a policy person, or perhaps someday the president yourself.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's such a great philosophy to live life by. Just gain that knowledge and that experience to be, the most top expert in your given field. We know that Barbara Jordan adhered strictly to process, but she also championed civil rights. Throughout your career, how have you been able to balance process and how the fight for civil rights has and continues to evolve throughout the years? Where is the next frontier of civil rights?
I can give you a couple of examples for that in terms of why it's important to know what the rules are. My first job out of law school was the world's worst job. Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, I've asked people, what did you do? And my mom, when she was a student, she would go pick cotton in the summer times with her parents, and I thought that was the worst job, because she made me go one time with her just for one day, just so I would know what it felt like to pick cotton. Hey, by the way, worst idea for take your daughter to work day. Picking cotton, no. But the worst job after law school was I was part of an investigative task force that was looking at the mistreatment of elderly in nursing homes in Texas. And the reason it was a bad job was that our legal process allowed for a remedy where you closed the nursing home down if it was violating the state law. So you were creating sick, elderly, homeless people. And the lesson I learned, and I was in my early 20s, was you've got to plan ahead for a remedy that will protect the people you're advocating for. We planned ahead to win in court, and we won, but we didn't have the legal remedy that we needed for the people. So the state legislature in Texas did add to the remedies for that the nursing home could be put in receivership. That meant that the administrators were told to leave the building, and new administrators were brought in to feed and care and provide health support for the residents of the nursing homes of Texas. So my takeaway, first of all, is you got to think for the long game. You know, not what will make things better tomorrow, but what will make the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. The other thing I've learned about process is you've got to immerse yourself in how things are done. So when I started working on employment cases and education cases, I would go to all the city and government meetings. Back then you had to do them in person. Now you can just catch them online and stream them. But I would learn how they make decisions. And I found one thing I learned is you got to put people on committees and on commissions. A lot of the things are already wired and are already worked out before it gets to that public meeting and the public vote. So that's another takeaway that I think Barbara Jordan would be doing today. She'd be nominating her students, and she'd be putting community folk on commissions at local and state levels. The last takeaway about process is that don't take no for an answer. Be strategic and plan to take it up that hierarchy of decision makers and get it as high up as you can. I mean, always ask people to explain themselves and explain their decisions and put it on the record, because you can try again at the next time this issue comes up again. Redistricting is an example of that. We redistrict when the census results come out. That means that we draw the lines for congressional seats, and the populations grow usually among the minority and Black communities. And then the seats get given to the Anglo areas of Texas. The voters who were strategic testified and said, I predict this is going to happen. You know, we're going to get 3 seats for Texas, 4 new seats for Texas, but they're going to go to white neighborhoods. And it happened, and they were ready, and they went all the way to the US Supreme Court. The only folk who were able to get the seats redrawn were the Mexican-American litigants. And that was because they used the process. They followed the system. You will have allies who will march in the streets. You will have allies who will write poems and use their artwork to carry messages. You will have allies who write the checks to pay for people to help get out the vote. But because you are students and you've been given an excellent education here, I see you as being those folk who are making those processes available to everybody, and who are always being critical and always showing where the processes are not working and how they need to be improved. And I guess I'm a teacher because I used to teach 8th graders. That's your homework.
Thank you for that. Although more homework is probably not what we need at this point in the semester. Yeah, Barbara Jordan insisted on an America as good as promised. Do you think that we are getting closer to that promise? And if not, how can we continue that fight?
It's ironic that as a country set up by immigrants, that when we displaced the indigenous people, all these immigrants in the 1600s and 1700s are still not embracing the fact that immigrants make our country stronger. You know, so the first thing that occurs to me when you ask me of that broad question is a very specific. We need to find our community voice. We need to come together. We do not need to let the issue of immigration divide us. We've been divided before by this issue. When we had the Great Depression, the federal and state agencies deported anyone who looked like they were from Mexico, including US citizens born here, were put on trains and shipped away from their families because this country was divided. They were blaming the economy on people who wanted to work, who wanted jobs. This is an issue where Barbara Jordan was key, as a co-chair on a commission created by President Clinton to look at how we could deal with this division on immigration. And the hallmark of the fact that she was successful as a leader was that a lot of people complained about it. A lot of people complained about the result. Now, sometimes, you know, you hit that perfect target and everybody's happy, but that is so rare. Usually one group overwhelmingly is happy with the result of what a task force does. Barbara Jordan, as a co-chair, was able to get positive remarks from the business community as well as the civil rights community. And she got criticized by both of them. That meant that she listened to the entire group, that she listened to the whole, and that she tried to move forward in a direction that the country needed to. In the 90s, we had a huge deficit, and the entire national budget was a wreck, and we were trying to balance the budget. And so it was important that we have conversations about why are employers allowed to bring in anybody they want and say, I need this this person from this other country because I'm going to pay them less. So why were employers allowed to do that without giving anyone any notice? With just bring them in, just send out a big van or a truck and come back full of cheap labor. And one of the results of this commission was that we adopted as a nation employer sanctions. Before that, what was going on was the penalties and the responsibilities always fell on the immigrants, and the employers had no responsibilities at all. And so the employers weren't happy with her that the commission went in the direction of employer sanctions. So that is an example of doing something that's hard, but doing something that's necessary if we were to balance the budget. In our near future, we're going to be talking about balancing our budgets again. And we don't want to do it by giving any one group, whether it be the employers or whether it be immigrants, all of the yeses and all of the nods and say, yes, whatever you want, we're going to do that for you. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to talk to each other. And Texas is an example of having taken a really hard stand on immigration. Texas would not let school children have in-state tuition if they were not U.S. born children. And the U.S. Supreme Court asked the briefs to be filed and asked Texas to explain, why are you doing this? And Texas is, it's going to save us so much money. We're going to be, we're just going to be flush with surplus cash when we exclude those kids. And the court looked carefully at the record and scrutinized it and said, it's going to cost you so much money if these children are out on the streets, if they're not cared for, if they're not educated, they are going to weigh down the economy, and they're going to be victims of crime or even participants in crime. So the US Supreme Court looked at the facts, the hard facts, that something that looks like a shortcut, something that looks like an easy solution is too good to be true. It's not true that excluding immigration is going to save this country money. And we have to look at those facts. And I think Barbara Jordan would be looking at that issue and would be talking to other members of Congress, and would be talking at churches, and would be talking in public arenas and online. I think that's an issue that she would be telling folk. If you're saying that the Dreamers should have a pathway to citizenship, why has that not happened? They have been waiting for a pathway to citizenship for more than a decade, for 2 decades. I was a young lawyer in the team that worked on the Plyler versus Doe case. And the little children in 3rd grade and 4th grade testified in the judge's chamber. And they told the truth. The truth was they wanted to go to school. And those kids are now parents, and they're still telling the truth. They want to have a pathway to citizenship, and they are innocent. They didn't do anything to deserve being excluded from that pathway, and they've been waiting a long, long time.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantú. That's so much history to unpack. But I think I get to ask our last student question. And one of the things that we heard Barbara Jordan say in her speech is that government is invigorated when each one of us is willing to participate in shaping the future of this nation. And I think, we have started to see a lot of young people be invigorated, whether it was after last summer's killing of George Floyd or after the Parkland shooting. More and more young people are really becoming politically engaged. But I think we also see a lot of tensions arise when there is change that needs to be created, but there's also people in power who want to maintain a status quo. So how do we continue to encourage and invigorate people to take part in shaping our future when so much of the power structure doesn't seem to be for that change?
I think part of the stress is how we talk to each other. I mean, I've always talked to people I've sued as if they were my neighbor. Like, after this lawsuit's over, I still am going to see this person, and I want to be sure that they don't report me that I don't mow my lawn often enough. So I always treat the people I've sued like someone I'm going to see in church or see at the supermarket later on. And I think the way we that tone that we maintain is so important, because Barbara Jordan treated everyone equally, whether you were a US senator or whether you were, someone that worked in a cafeteria. To her, everyone was a human being that deserved her attention and her respect. And that tone is really important, because we need to take it down a notch in terms of shaming people who made mistakes, or in terms of not giving people a chance to redeem themselves. Shaming someone and then saying, hey, I did a good job because I said something really, I just nailed that person. I really just said something that they deserve to hear. But did you actually get someone educated? Did you find someone a job? Did you help someone get immigrated? I mean, the shaming isn't the end. It's not the goal of civil rights. I mean, one gentleman was in the courtroom with me, and he says, oh, Norma, you're going to say that I discriminate on the basis of ethnicity. And I said, no, I'm not going to say that. But I am going to say you have choices, and you are making deliberate choices that do hurt people on the basis of their ethnic background. And you have those choices, and you will continue to have those choices. So rather than defund or remove their power, I try to remind them that the power they've got can be redeployed, can be more inclusive, can be more respectful. And that I used to say to people, one of these days this country will tip, and the white males will be the minorities. And I used to say that back in the 70s and 80s. And then I'm going to work and fight to be sure that the minority white males' rights are being protected. And so you've got to remember, it's what we do to others can come back on us. We've got to manage ourselves and our tone to act in a balanced way, a harmonious way, a way that makes sense, whether your audience is white male or your audience is Black female. You're respectful of folk because they are people, and that tone can gain you allies. In the 80s, there were marches by the KKK down Congress Avenue, and the police chiefs in their annual conference invited civil rights people to come talk to them about the clashes that happened when the march was over, and Mexican American leaders who were counter protesters got beat up by the Austin police. And I said, yes, I'll go. Okay, so they sent me to Bandera, Texas, which is the most cowboy place you can go. The folk who greeted me, wore their cowboy boots, their belt buckle the size of a hubcap, and those were the Mexican American police chiefs, folks. And I spent 2 days with them, just explaining to them we want to be part of you. We want women officers. We want Hispanic officers. We want to be part of keeping people protected and keeping people safe. We don't want you all to go into a room where we can't be at the table and talk to you about giving you feedback. You know, I'm here today to tell you we're not satisfied that you've done enough. And please take that feedback in a constructive way. So rather than lecture and hector them, I tried to reason. And I've not been effective, because here we are, 40 years later, and we still have issues with community treatment and community issues and our law enforcement. But that doesn't mean we just give up and say no law enforcement, because Barbara Jordan would never give up. That was her hallmark. She worked until her last week on life, and she was invigorated by being around young people. It gave her energy to interact with her students. And today her students are in places where they are making policy. And today they are leaders, and because they knew and they got to interact with Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. Women leaders have a challenge that sometimes they are worried about their appearance, or they're worried about being stereotyped. One wonderful quote from Governor Ann Richards, when she got on a national stage to address an audience of folk who had traveled from all over the country to hear her speak. She looked at the podium that was made out of plexiglass, and she said, "If I'd known you were going to do this, I would have brought another pair of legs." So even if someone like Ann Richards can remember that, don't take yourself so seriously, can remember that you're just a person, then if Ann Richards can do that, and I saw Barbara Jordan do that every time she spoke, she was just a person, and someone who wouldn't let anybody stereotype her and say you're Negro, or you're feminist. She was all of that and more.
Thank you so much. It's been a true honor to share this time with you, Commissioner Cantú. So thank you for your time and for your wisdom. Sam, we're gonna turn it over to you to tell the audience how they can learn more and get involved with the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation.
All right, thank you, Claudia. As we come to the close of Women's History Month, I think this is a perfect opportunity for us all to reflect on the impact that Barbara Jordan has made on U.S. history, not only through her groundbreaking achievements, but through the doors that she has opened for all. Not only through her words, and not only through her expressions, but most of all, her actions and the deeds that she has actually implemented. We invite you to visit the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation.org to access more of Ms. Jordan's speeches and witness her impact. Thank you to our student panelists, Azim Edwin, Aaron Escajeda, and Claudia Sandoval, for participating in today's program. We look forward to seeing what each of you will do next. And a special thank you to U.S. Commissioner on Civil Rights, Norma Cantú, for sharing your perspective today. I hope today's program has inspired you to ask important questions and learn more. Please join the conversation and engage with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Barbara Jordan FF. We look forward to connecting with you.